You know, they're true, but there's two risks. One of them is how much you're going to enjoy this speech, because he's now raised expectations, and I need to lower them. And you know, we're going to get like a strong B+ speech here, maybe, if I'm lucky, just so you know. Second, it tends to create the idea that I have overcome this disability, or that I'm not part of this community anymore because somehow I went to a fancy school or I did something important. It turns out that dyslexia is part of you for life. It doesn't go away, it doesn't change, it's not going to be remediated or wiped out. You can learn skills that help you adapt and play to your strengths, but it's part of who you are forever. And I want to start by really acknowledging the work that you guys have done. You've done an incredible thing. You have finished high school. You have finished the hard part of the dyslexic education. The part that begins by teaching you reading and math and spelling and then moves on to writing research papers. It gets much better now. And I would start this speech with a story that was told to me by a friend named Lou Salza, who used to live in Hawaii. He runs a school similar to this in Ohio now. And he calls it the parable of the giant sea turtle. And in it, he says, when you see a sea turtle on the beach, it looks awful. It's kicking up sand, it's trying to get across, and it moves very slowly. But as soon as it gets to the water, it swims deeper than any other animal in the ocean. It lives longer. It is more culturally interesting and more beautiful than many things in the ocean. And I would say that being dyslexic is sort of like being that sea turtle. When you're in school, it's like being on the beach. You're like, God, this is hard. Ugh, I can't make it. And then you get into life. And that's where you guys are headed right now. Some of you are going to college. Some of you are going to take on professions. I don't know all of them. I do know that you won, I think the technical number was $1.38 million in scholarship. Unless someone has won a scholarship while they're sitting here, they haven't told us. Does anyone know? Okay. That's wonderful. So I want to just touch on one or two things that I would encourage you to think about as you move forward. I'm going to talk about two words. One of them is normal, and the other one is retard. Normal is actually the more damaging of those two words, and I will tell you why. Normal is just a setting on my dryer. That's all it is, right? It's nothing more. But we invent this concept of normal in order to isolate things that are not normal. If you look in the DSM-4, now the DSM-5, this is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychological Analysis. This is basically what provides us services as people who are dyslexic. They categorize all the problems. They tell you you're OCD, or you're dyslexic, or dysgraphic, or dyscalculic, or psychotic. Because they don't have a definition of normal. There's nothing in there that actually points to what normal is. They just define all the problems. And when you think about that, that just sets you up for failure because they've never actually established what normal was. So I would encourage you to question that word whenever you hear it. Now I'll talk about the word retard. That's a word that gets used to attack people who are different, and very frequently people with disabilities. It is not infrequent. There's actually letters from the Department of Education that use that word to say this is considered harassment and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act if your school doesn't stop people from using that word to attack people. But what I would say is, when you think about that word, think about it as a knife that was thrown at you, that you can take from them and say, you can't throw it at me anymore. You can say, I am successful. And where the problem is in your mind for thinking that you could attack someone with that word. That word is an insult to intelligence that you would even say it. And I encourage people to think about that word and not try and distance themselves from people with disabilities, because we are people with disabilities. Now, it's not a learning disability, let me be clear. I have no problem learning. I can learn very, very well. I have a reading disability. That's how I experience it. I have a spelling disability. These are considered, under the law, major life activities. Dunking a basketball, can't do it. Not a major life activity, not a disability. So, when you think about, someone can dunk a basketball out there, I guess, maybe. When you think about the word, I think about people with disabilities who went before us. People in wheelchairs, people who are blind, who opened up the school system so that we have the opportunity to study and to be included. And I think of, a friend of mine who came to me and was uncomfortable with the word dyslexia. There's a friend of mine I worked with at Intel, a guy named Pete Denman, just at the beginning of the story, I'm going to tell you that all this has come out on his terms now, but I'm going to give you the history very briefly. I met him at Intel. He was a designer, and I was making the Intel Reader. And in the early days of a project, you have no money. So you run around and you do lunches and go, hey, anyone want to open up a lab on the weekend and design something? You know, like you kind of do a dog and pony show constantly.